We begin this hour with Prime Minister Mark Carney set to embark on a major trade and security mission this morning. He's going to take off from Ottawa next hour for Mexico City, and there he will meet with the leader of Canada's other North American trading partner, of course, President Sheinbaum. Both countries are trying to navigate the trade and tariff war launched by U.S. President Trump. So Carney and President Sheinbaum are expected to talk trade, investment, and strengthening the bilateral relationship. Both countries are preparing for the renewal of the trade agreement with the United States, CUSMA, as we call it here. This visit is also expected to produce a new Canada-Mexico comprehensive partnership agreement and to launch a security dialogue focused on issues like transnational crime and drug smuggling. We're going to hear about all of those issues with the reporter who is traveling with the Prime Minister and covering this summit in Mexico. And Evan Dyer joins me live on the tarmac before he gets on that plane as well. Evan, good to see you, and really anticipating your reporting on these key issues. You were saying on the National last night that part of the job for the Prime Minister is to mend some fences because comments from Canadian premiers last year, because of the Donald Trump tariff war, really landed a really sour note for those in Mexico. What did they say, and what has the impact been that the Prime Minister is going to have to contend with?
Yes, that's right. And these comments go back actually to before Donald Trump's inauguration. But President-elect Trump at the end of 2024 was already making it very clear that he had an agenda of tariffs and that once again he was going to put CUSMA, the North American Free Trade Arrangement, under pressure. And we saw some Canadian premiers, particularly Doug Ford of Ontario and Danielle Smith of Alberta, respond by suggesting that perhaps one alternative or one solution for Canada would be to try to make a sort of a separate peace with the United States, ignoring Mexico, and even to cut Mexico entirely out of NAFTA. And there were some other remarks, particularly from Doug Ford, about how Canada should not be compared to Mexico or put in the same category. That got quite a bit of play in Mexican media and caused a reaction. Let's listen to some of what Doug Ford had to say back then.
What I'm proposing to the federal government, we do a bilateral trade deal with the U.S., and if Mexico wants a bilateral trade deal with Canada, God bless them. But I'm not going to be drawn down with these cheap imports taking men and women's jobs from hardworking Ontarians.
So, of course, already in the first term of Trump, there had been, I wouldn't say necessarily tensions between Canada and Mexico, but diverging interests. You know, the two countries from the beginning, when Trump first came along in 2016, talked about cooperating and having a common front. But at the same time, they were negotiating separately, and they do have different interests. And of course, the Trump administration is always keen to drive a wedge between them. And so we did see some of those tensions going right back to the first term. So there's a fence mending mission here. It's already begun, really. Claudia Sheinbaum, the president of Mexico, came to Canada for the G7. We've seen a visit there by Canada's Foreign Minister, Anita Anand, and Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne in August. So there's already been some progress on this front. But this trip is about sending a message that Canada really is committed to three-way North American integration and wants to cooperate with Mexico, and that the federal government really has no interest in throwing Mexico under the bus.
So when you speak of three-way negotiation, they'll be probably discussing the ultimate renewal of CUSMA. But on the bilateral front, there's a lot more that can be done to improve that relationship and build on the economic relationship between the two countries. Evan, what is Canada and Prime Minister Carney, what are the outcomes that Canada's hoping for?
Well, you're quite right to split it into those two focuses, if you like, the one of preserving North American free trade, including the United States, as free as possible under the circumstances, but also the second one of advancing the alternative to that trade with the United States, which is to diversify Canada's own trade. And I think most economists would agree that both for Canada and Mexico, NAFTA first, and since then the new arrangements that have replaced it, have really been about trade with the United States. After all, that is the neighbor, the immediate neighbor for both Canada and Mexico, which are separated from one another by this large country in between them. It's also, of course, by far the biggest market. And as a result, perhaps Canada and Mexico haven't focused as much as they should have and could have on developing trade between the two of them. And so there is talk of a Canada-Mexico trade corridor. That would, of course, be primarily a sea corridor. to diversify Canada's trading relationship and investment relationship with Mexico. And to that end, we see a number of CEOs on this trip of some of Canada's biggest companies heading down there. But of course, there's also that negotiation coming up of CUSMA, which Canada and Mexico both very much want to preserve in as close a form as possible to the old NAFTA, the real free trade arrangement, and the tariff-free CUSMA that was originally negotiated with the Trump administration. And so we can also expect to see a lot of talk about how to confront that negotiation together, how to have common positions and strategies, not to let the Trump administration divide and rule, as well as several other issues around security, transnational drug trafficking, and so on, that of course also feed into this trade dispute with the United States.
Thank you very much, Evan. And again, we'll look forward to the reporting as you cover the Prime Minister's Mexico trip.